They called him reckless, they called him crazy, but up there, above the clouds, where death came screaming out of the sun, there was one man whose courage didn't come from training or rank. It came from something deeper, from the heartbeat of a Missouri farm boy who refused to follow anyone's rules but his own. October 8th, 1943. 6,000 feet above the Netherlands. The roar of engines, the whistle of wind, the tremor of fear. Flight Officer Ralph K. Hofer gripped the control stick of his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, sweat pooling under his oxygen mask. It was his first combat mission. He had never fired his guns in anger. Below him, the world was a blur of green and grey. But through the oil-smeared glass, he saw something that burned into his memory forever. A Messerschmitt Bf-109 tearing into an American fighter with ruthless precision. Every rule he had been taught flashed through his mind. Stay in formation. Protect your leader. Never ever go alone. And then he broke them all. Something inside him, something forged in the dirt and dust of Missouri wheat fields and sharpened in Chicago boxing rings, refused to obey. He pulled hard on the stick, peeled away from formation, and dove straight into chaos. His thunderbolt howled. His guns lit up. In seconds, the enemy plane disintegrated in a burst of fire and debris. When he landed back at Debden that night, the hardened veterans crowded around the gun camera footage. They couldn't believe it. The kid, on his first mission, had scored a kill. The film didn't lie. Ralph K. Hofer was no ordinary rookie. And that was only the beginning. He had grown up far from the skies. Born June 22nd, 1921, on a small farm near Salem, Missouri, his father died when he was just 4. The Great Depression followed, and Ralph learned early what it meant to survive. When his mother remarried, he took his stepfather's name, Hofer, and grew up with calloused hands, fixing tractors, hauling hay, working until every muscle screamed. The boy who would one day dominate the skies grew up in a world without electricity, without plumbing, without luxury of any kind. But he had drive. He had fire. Athletics became his escape. Boxing in Chicago's Golden Gloves, playing football on muddy fields, learning to take hits and never stay down. That toughness, that defiance, would one day terrify German pilots. His path to the cockpit wasn't destiny, it was accident. In the fall of 1941, while delivering a car from Detroit to California, he crossed into Canada on a whim. A border officer, mistaking his purpose, pointed him toward a Royal Canadian Air Force recruiting office. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of restlessness, Ralph walked in. Hours later, he had signed up to fly, despite never having even sat in an airplane. He had no math skills, no technical education, no idea what he was getting into, but he had instinct. He had charm. He had grit. By 1942, Sergeant Pilot Hofer was training in Britain, frustrated by endless delays keeping him from the front. When the United States entered the war, he transferred to the U.S. Army Air Forces, earning the unique rank of flight officer, a non-commissioned pilot with the authority to fight. In September 1943, he joined the legendary 4th Fighter Group at RAF Debden, home of America's most aggressive airmen, men who had once flown with the RAF's Eagle squadrons before the U.S. entered the war. Hofer fit in perfectly and stood out completely. He wore his hair long, his uniform loose, sometimes a football jersey instead of a flight jacket. Around base, he was seen with his Alsatian dog, Duke, often bringing the dog into the cockpit with him. To the MPs, he was a walking violation. To his friends, he was a wild spirit. To his commanders, he was a headache they couldn't cure, and a talent they couldn't replace. For months after that first kill, Hofer flew mission after mission without another confirmed victory. But the fire inside him didn't cool. Then came February 1944. The floodgates opened. In those cold, high skies over Europe, Hofer became a storm. Between February and May, he destroyed nearly 30 enemy aircraft, some in the air, some on the ground, charging into combat with reckless precision. His radio often failed. His fuel often ran low. But he never stopped hunting. By March, the 4th Fighter Group received the new P-51 Mustang, a sleek, silver stallion with range deep into Germany. It was a perfect match for Hofer's style. On one mission over Munich, assigned as a junior wingman, he spotted a lone German fighter below and dove without warning. Before anyone else could react, it was gone, blown apart by Hofer's guns. His fuel was almost empty, his radio dead, his sense of direction non-existent. When his propeller jammed and his engine died, he glided toward neutral Switzerland. But somehow, as if fate itself refused to let him die, the engine coughed back to life. He flew back to England with his canopy missing and only 6 gallons of fuel left. By then, he was officially an ace. 5 kills confirmed. His superiors hated his disobedience, but couldn't argue with his results. Every time he broke the rules, he came back with another victory. By May 1944, he was promoted to 1st lieutenant, though his name was on just as many reprimand reports as commendations. That month he went on a rampage. In only 10 days, he destroyed 14 German aircraft, half in the air, half strafed on the ground. He became one of the highest-scoring aces in the 8th Air Force. His radio chatter became legend. Over the Alps, while others whispered coordinates and code words, Hofer keyed his mic and drawled, "Gee, ain't the Alps pretty?" Even in the face of death, he found time to marvel. On D-Day, he led low-level strafing runs against German convoys in Normandy. His unit took heavy losses, almost wiped out, but Hofer survived. A few days later, ground fire tore into his plane. He crash-landed, stole a German helmet and a copy of Mein Kampf, and flew back to base with both in his lap, grinning like a man who'd cheated death itself. By June, his unit prepared for Operation Frantic, an ambitious shuttle mission from England to Soviet airfields in Ukraine. His commanding officer, Colonel Don Blakesley, tried to ground him after Hofer refused vaccinations. Only when Ralph relented was he cleared to fly. On June 21, 1944, he took off with Blakesley's formation. Somewhere over Poland, Hofer got separated, landed at the wrong Soviet base, and was detained by Red Army soldiers who didn't believe his story. Days later, once his identity was confirmed, they released him. He promptly got lost again, landing in Malta instead of Italy. It was almost comical if it hadn't been real. Then came July 2, 1944, a mission over Budapest. The skies were alive with flak and fire. Hofer's leader's plane was hit and went down. Witnesses say Hofer circled the crash site, refusing to abandon his comrade. That act of loyalty, so pure, so human, was his last. A German fighter dived out of the sun. Tracers tore through the air. Hofer's P-51 vanished behind the hills. He was just 23 years old. Weeks later, reports confirmed his death near Mostar, in what is now Bosnia and Herzegovina. His plane had been hit by anti-aircraft fire during a low-level attack on a German airfield. The Mustang exploded into one of the gun emplacements it was trying to destroy. Ralph K. Hofer was gone, but not forgotten. He was credited with around 30 enemy aircraft destroyed, 15 in the air and 15 on the ground. He earned the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal, and the Purple Heart. His name joined the ranks of the top aces of the 8th Air Force, the 23rd highest-scoring pilot, and the 2nd highest ace of the 4th Fighter Group to die in action. His commander, Colonel Blakesley, who had flown hundreds of missions, never knew whether to ground him or protect him. Fellow ace James Goodson called him a magnificent fool, a man who could turn chaos into victory. Historians still argue whether his success came because of his recklessness or in spite of it, but maybe that's the point. Ralph Hofer's courage and chaos were inseparable. He fought like he lived, wild, instinctive, and fearless. To the German pilots trained in strict formation, his unpredictable style seemed insane, but that insanity made him deadly. He didn't just fly missions, he waged personal war, a one-man rebellion above the clouds. And when you look at his story, you see something bigger than medals or kill counts. You see a farm boy who grew up with nothing, who fixed tractors by hand, boxed for spare change, and accidentally signed up to fly. You see a man who ignored every rule and somehow became immortal because of it. Today, Ralph K. Hofer rests in Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, buried among other unidentified airmen. His name carved in stone, his legend carved in history. The sky he once ruled is silent now, but his story still roars because Ralph Kid Hofer wasn't just a pilot. He was proof that sometimes victory belongs to the ones who refuse to play by the rules. The farm boy from Missouri who defied the Air Force, defied the odds, and defied death, until death finally caught up. But even then, he won something it could never take away: immortality.